Hello, my name is Rodrigo Gonzalez, and I will be presenting on Cartesian dualism, a threat to Hegg and the new cognitive science. That's the title of my presentation. I will be presenting along with Guido Vallejos. We belong to the Center for Cognitive Science, Universidad de Chile. So first, I will give an outline of the presentation. In the first place, I will give an introduction, which is the motivation, aim, and key idea of the talk. Secondly, I will be presenting on Descartes' two arguments about the mind. Thirdly, the classic cognitive science versus the new cognitive science. So I will be emphasizing the difference between the two approaches to cognitive science. The fourth part is what the heck. So it's about the hypothesis of extended cognition, which is put forward by Chalmers and Andy Clark. And finally, I will give some conclusions. So let me begin with the introduction. So we have the first philosopher on whom I will be presenting. His name is Descartes, and he lived in the 17th century. Now, it's very important that according to Descartes, things are supposed to be substances, which means that they can exist on their own. And this is related to the view that the mind, as a substance, can live independently from matter, so from the body. Secondly, the mind can be also studied as a scientific phenomenon, and this is the mechanical view of the mind. So I will contrast these two approaches, the Cartesian approach and the mechanistic, let's suppose to say, mechanistic view of the mind. Then moving on to the fourth slide. So in other words, Descartes' metaphysics, so his distinction between mind and body, endorses the Christian view. So for that reason, Descartes also embraces the mechanistic view of the mind. So that's somehow contradictory in Descartes, but it is not, because according to Descartes, there's a separability argument which focuses on the difference between mind and body, and according to Descartes, mind and body can be separated. So according to the separability argument, these two substances can exist independently. But at the same time, Descartes proposed another argument, which is called the sailor and the ship disanalogy, which is more or less the following. The sailor and the ship disanalogy, well, this analogy is an argument which compares two different things, A and B, and it says, according to the argument, that A is not like B. So A and B are different. That's the reason why it is called the disanalogy. So let me remark again the separability argument. According to this argument, it has three different parts. Firstly, we can conceive that mind may exist without body. So it's possible, for example, that we can imagine that mind and body are independent. So we can have, for example, mental states, and these mental states can exist without the body. So at least we can conceive that possibility. Secondly, we have that Almighty God can perform this separation. So even though for us it's only possible to imagine that mind and body are separated, since God has superpowers, he can separate the two substances. But in reality, and in the physical reality, I mean, mind and body are supposed to be joined and intermingled. That's at least the Cartesian argument. Then I will say very briefly thinks about the pilot and the chip disanalogy, which is the second Cartesian argument. And he says that according to this analogy, he compares the situation of a sailor who happens to be on a ship, and he can look at the damage of the ship, for example, the bow of the ship, from a long distance. And according to Descartes, this is the exact reverse situation we have with the situation of the mind and the body. According to Descartes, mind and body are united. They are unified. They are intermingled. But we can conceive that they are separated. So for that reason, the separability argument and the sailor on the ship disanalogy are not contradictory. They are consistent, because one argument says that the mind and body can be separated, so that's the reason why it's called the separability argument. And the second argument says that mind and body are unified and intermingled. In the opposite situation of a sailor who happens to look at the damage of the ship. Then moving on to the third part of the presentation, I will say a few things about the classic and the new cognitive science. The first thing to bear in mind is that programs are very important for the classic cognitive science. And according to the classic cognitive paradigm of cognitive science, programs are different from the physical realization of the programs. So, for example, we can have a program which is a machine, and we also have a computer which happens to be a machine as well. But they are different. And the main point of classical cognitive science is that mind and programs may exist independently of the physical realization. For example, a program may exist in different physical realizations in one computer and a different computer. For example, a digital computer and a quantum computer both can run the same program. So programs can be realized in different materials, even though the program is the same. And this idea is very much related to Descartes' separability argument, because according to the separability argument, mind can exist without body. So according to the classical cognitive science, programs can exist without physical realization. So in this sense, they are more or less similar. But there's also the new cognitive science. And according to the new cognitive science, mind can extend in space. So mind is not limited by the brain and the skin, these two boundaries. The mind has no boundaries in the sense that mind can exist in the world, in the environment. For example, we have different examples of this. We have, for example, a notepad. A notepad is supposed to be a memory bank that exists beyond your mind. Then you have a shopping list. If you go to a supermarket, for example, you can use a shopping list, and the shopping list is supposed to be part of your memory banks. You can also have a mobile. Some people, for example, read on the internet many articles which they don't memorize because they know that they will find those articles again on the internet. So moving on to the 10th slide. So we can pose this question: can the mind exist apart from the brain? If we answer no to the question, then mind can't be extended. If we say no, there's no mind outside the boundaries of brain and skin, this is more or less what classical cognitive science says. If we answer yes to the question, can the mind exist apart from the brain, then we can also imply that many devices may integrate the mind, and then we can say that there are different memory banks in the physical world. And this is perhaps the most important idea about the new cognitive science, or what I call here the new cognitive science. Then the fourth part of the presentation is it's a question which happens to be a joke. What the heck? And it's supposed to be an approach by David Chalmers and Andy Clark. And according to Heck, the hypothesis is the reverse argument of the Descartes separability argument, and that's the reason why I use an X on Descartes' picture. So the main thesis of Heck of the hypothesis of extended cognition is related to what's called externalism, which is a view according to which the mind extends in the environment. So firstly, we have that for Descartes, mind and body are separable, they can be separated. Secondly, we have that mind and body separability implies that the former can exist without the latter. So for example, we can conceive again that we have minds, but we have no bodies. And thirdly, Heck, according to Heck, parts of the environment are integrated into cognition. This is precisely what I said about the memory banks. There may exist memory banks that extend beyond your skin and brain. They can go, they can exist, for example, in the environment. So in summary, the externalism has a tendency which is called active externalism. And according to this view, intelligent actions integrate the mind and the environment. And I can quote Clark here. He says, quotation marks, in seeing cognition as an extended one, it's not merely making a terminological decision, it makes a significant difference to the methodology of scientific investigation. That's the reason why, end of the quote. Then that's the reason why I say that, the new cognitive science makes important methodological differences about scientific cognition, about the investigation of scientific, in terms of the scientific method. According to the new cognitive science, we can't restrict our investigation to the brain and the skin as boundaries. We have to extend our scientific investigation to the environment itself. So what are the conclusions of my presentation? In the first place, the Descartes separability argument puts off cognitive scientists in the sense that the argument can't allow them to clarify the extension of cognition, and this entices what I call the cognitive border war. Secondly, the Cartesian separability argument promotes a more dichotomous and less ecumenical view of cognition, and this is very important too, because according to the new cognitive science, we can be more ecumenical about cognition in the sense that we can integrate parts which are supposed to be important for our cognitive faculties. And finally, the last conclusion is that the Descartes dualism clearly affects the demarcation of cognitive science problems. For example, Descartes' dualism implies a very important difference between the mind and the environment, whereas for active externalism, as I said, the demarcation of cognitive science problems isn't only confined to the limits of cognition. The cognition goes beyond boundaries, beyond limits. So that's the end of my presentation. Thanks very much indeed for your questions, which I will try to address the best I can here. Thanks very much again.